Well, let's get to our program. We have a kind of a two-part program this morning. We're going to hear from an important official at DoD, and then we're going to have our panel that we like to have every year. We switch out the folks on the panel, but we always have a great dialogue with our group of defense experts. But first, it's my pleasure to introduce Brett Lambert, who joined the Department of Defense in 2009 as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Manufacturing and Industrial Base Policy. Has to be one of the longer names at DoD. Mr. Lambert serves as the Principal Advisor to the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisitions, Technology, and Logistics in all matters related to defense industrial base, including industrial capabilities, assessments, industry, mergers, acquisitions, and consolidation, and most importantly, the preservation of essential industries and technology. I know this position has been around a while. I don't think it was until recent years, the last couple of years, that this became a very critical position, especially for our membership as we start thinking about defense downsizing. And I said to Brett that in many ways this is an introduction to Brett and to his role, because I think it's something that all of us are going to be talking about in the years to come. So I'm very happy Brett was able to join us, and please join me in welcoming to ADC.
Hey, thanks everyone, and I really appreciate being here. Let me begin by trying to describe to you, in my mind, over the last 4 years I've been in the office, what I mean by industrial base. The base is comprised of an extremely complex and diverse set of companies. Many of you represent organizations and areas that represent those particular companies, but there is no such thing as a defense industrial base. It includes companies of all shapes and sizes. It's resourced from around the globe, and that's an issue that we all need in this particular room to understand and to deal with. It's a global industry. Companies at any tier and any size offer critical or hard-to-make components that we ultimately rely on for our warfighters. So likewise, companies at various tiers have the ability to offer highly competitive products and services to the department, which could ultimately displace the current vendors that we have. So some products and services sold by companies in the defense base are unique to defense applications. For the most part, that's not true. The demand for exclusively defense products has never been less than it is today. And that's very important for you as this organization to understand. In short, there's not a single defense industrial base. There's a defense market. And that's serviced by a diverse selection of companies which span and often reflect the greater global economy for goods and services that we all face. I kind of liken it to the Mall of the Americas, where you have anchor stores. I don't know how many of you have been to the Mall of the Americas, where you have anchor stores where you recognize the common names, the Boeings, the Lockheeds. Everyone knows who is in, quote, the defense business. But then there are all these other stores throughout the mall that you look at and you think, why would you even walk in there? Why would you buy from that mall? The fact is the Department of Defense buys everything. Everything. The people who buy from the Mall Americas, Department of Defense. Whether it is a ship or a shoestring, we buy it. We spend over $1.5 billion a day, buying products and services to protect our warfighters in battle. So what's important about that analogy is that even the stores not familiar to most of us, which are the prime contractors, the entire mall represents even a small portion of the overall supply chain that provides the components of goods and services that stock the shelves of everything we depend upon in the Department of Defense. The U.S. military's superior operational capabilities are enabled by this diverse base. For decades, the United States has commanded a decisive lead on the quality of our defense-related research, engineering, and production for our execution of global actions. However, these advantages that have enabled American predominance in the defense technology are not a birthright. And the key elements of the defense industrial base and capacity that are necessary to ensure U.S. dominance in future battlefields must be sustained and nurtured. The U.S. defense industrial base is critical to equipping our military and superior capabilities. The strong, technologically vibrant, and financially successful defense industrial base, many of which who here represent, could not happen without the strong support of the communities in which they reside. Now, I firmly believe that none of the efforts we're pursuing in the department to better align our declining resources, and that's what the panel will, I'm sure, talk about, can be judged successful if at the end of the day we don't have a financially robust and technologically advanced industrial base. Without that, all the policies we're talking about in the Pentagon are worthless. Because again, at the end of the day, everyone has to understand a simple fact. We in the Pentagon don't build a damn thing. Industry does. And industry resides in communities. So that has to be first and foremost in our minds as we make our budget decisions. What do we need to sustain, and how do we sustain it? So with that in mind, let me turn to three currents I see coursing through the industrial base. Simply put, our base is more global, it's more commercial, and it's more financially complex. And I'll speak to each of these quickly. But what I've just said will be truer tomorrow than it is today. More global, more commercial, more financially complex. So outdated constructs of a static or stale industrial base, where the U.S. government could dictate certain assurances about factories, about locations, or impose inflexible, singular, monolithic requirements upon industry, are outdated. They're simply not effective anymore. Any industrial-based supply chain policy has to take into account the fact that we have to develop much more nuanced and sophisticated appearances and policies to our industrial base. Overall, the goods and services the department now relies upon reach far deeper into the U.S. economy than most, even in the department, appreciate. While there are unique items produced solely for the department, these items themselves often rely upon a complex and integrated supply chain of product providers, which, if restricted at the second, third, fourth, and as we've discovered, even 14th tier, could jeopardize the ability to execute a warfighter's mission. So let me start with the first reality, which is our base is more global. And we have to recognize that. More and more, the advanced goods and services upon which we rely are produced by firms that were not founded in the United States. Also challenges much of our supply chain, particularly in the lower tiers and in intellectual and in IT information technology, are provided by firms that are not our closest allies. Now, buying from a more global environment offers the department many benefits. It increases competition, reduces costs. It allows for introduction of new technologies. It often supports coalition warfighting efforts, or at least makes them less difficult. And we can benefit from the lessons learned of other providers from other countries who have gone through a serious downturn that we are now experiencing. That said, buying from a more global environment, while it offers many benefits, has many challenges. These include, but aren't limited to, the main reason we're all here today, which is building in the United States, the threat of counterfeit or inferior parts entering the supply chain, the potential for undue reliance on components whose origin or actual configuration we may not fully understand, as well as the risk of leaked intellectual property to foreign businesses or, in fact, foreign governments. The second key feature of what's happening in our industrial capacity and industrial base, and linked to the first, is that we increasingly rely on the commercial marketplace. And this trend is frankly something the department has better understood in policy rather than practice. Hazard a guess, 25 years ago, 70% of the goods and services the department supplied or acquired were designed specifically for the department, and 30% were acquired from commercial enterprises. Today, that figure has actually completely flipped. whereas 70% of the goods and services that we acquire are designed primarily for the commercial marketplace, where we are the acquirer. We are not used to being the tail. We're used to being the dog. And the department has to fundamentally change its idea of how we acquire goods and services moving forward. It's a difficult concept for many in the department to get their arms around, particularly in the procurement environment. There will always be systems that we will absolutely need to have, whether that's nuclear, Navy, or certain space assets. But at the end of the day, increasingly we're going to rely on commercially based products to extend our warfighters' efforts in theater, and we have to understand how to better acquire those assets. So, as I've said, we're adjusting to this new reality. We're trying to do it. It's not easy. When I first came into the office 4 years ago, Secretary Gates requested that I look at the 4 previous downturns we had and how we had adjusted for our industrial-based policy and our community-based environment. So I did about a year-long effort in my office, and we came up with the fact that we were pretty much 0 for 4. We did every one of them wrong for different reasons. And it had a huge effect on our industrial base, huge effect on communities. After World War II, there was a large downturn, and then of course after Korea, and then the last one that we looked at was really the most similar to what we are dealing with now, which was started by a budget decision and then accelerated by the collapse of the Berlin Wall. And I'm sure the panel will talk more about that. At the end of the day, what our office was asked to do is how do we sustain an industrial base and an industrial communities that can resupply, that can accelerate, that can meet the challenge that we have for any scenario that we have in the future. And I think there's an important lesson here, and I don't know if anyone here is from Long Beach. Is anyone here from Long Beach or California in the area? One of the areas we looked at in this study was what happened to Long Beach. 65-year history of producing military aircraft, particularly the Long Beach campus, which is now a Boeing facility, but used to be the old MacDec, McDonnell Douglas facility. They produced 16,000 aircraft out of that facility, including DC-3s, C-47s, DC-8s, DC-9s, DC-10s, MD-80s, MD-90s, MD-11s, B-17s, A-20s, A-26s, C-74s, C-124s, A-4Ds, C-133s, including the last C-17s. Tens of thousands of additional aircraft were produced in that area and in that region during World War II. And during World War II, actually, the Douglas facility was pumping out an aircraft, and I can't even fathom this. There was an aircraft produced out of that area and that facility every 2 hours. It employed over 150,000 workers. During the Cold War, as we were winding down through the last downturn, they still had 80,000 manufacturers, 80,000 employees. The end of the Cold War, like everyone else, hammered that area. We stopped production for the most part in Long Beach. So what did Long Beach do? At the end of the day, they had about 25,000 employees. They didn't fight. They realized this was coming. They realized that they had to do something new. And so the city and the community of Long Beach got together, and they said, what's new? What can we do that's new? And in fact, because of what that community did, what that with the help of the U.S. federal government, but what that community did was say, hey, we're coming back stronger than ever. Due largely to the 2 ports that were organized and the large international trade that developed, during this huge decline in employment for skilled workers, unemployment actually fell in Long Beach and fell in the community. And employment actually grew by 8%. And it was for high-skilled, high-wage jobs moving to those two ports. The U.S. government played an important role in that transition. And what my message for you all today is, we are going through similar downturns. I can't build a new factory unless I close an old one. And we need to work with you to make that transition as painless as possible. So I will leave you with the third trend, which is the financial complexity of the market. Money moves to opportunity. We all know that. Money in communities, whether municipal or otherwise, will move to opportunities. If you present opportunities, money will go in that direction. But there is no free lunch in the U.S. government. We are trying to work, specifically this administration is trying to work aggressively on recreating manufacturing opportunities in the United States. And the last thing I'll close on before we get to this distinguished panel is how impressed I've been in my tenure for 4 years of the administration's effort to open these new manufacturing initiatives. We opened one, the Department of Defense. My office had an opportunity to be a key role in opening the first one in Youngstown, Ohio, for adaptive manufacturing. The President of the United States has twice now mentioned in the State of the Union, the last time asking for $1 billion to open 15 of these institutes. The department is not going to wait for Congress to act. We've opened one, and it's been wildly successful. I was just up there on adaptive manufacturing. We will be opening 2 more. The RFIs are out. I would encourage all of your communities to look carefully at those RFIs. Their RFIs are out. We will be making those awards, $70 million U.S. government money, matched 1-for-1, at least 1-for-1. Those awards will be announced by the end of this year, calendar year, not fiscal year. And we'll be looking at additive manufacturing, and the 2 new institutes are going to be, the department is running, DOE is running a third one, but we're going to be looking at metals. Is one of the, if you go to manufacturing.gov, you'll see all the RFIs. But if you're in town and you can stay until July 9th or 10th, I'd encourage you to all come back, I think, to this location to have the Proposers Day, where we will be describing specifically what we're planning to do and where we're planning to do it. So those are going to be community-based facilities, and they're based on manufacturing. And when I say based on manufacturing, it's about reclaiming the right that we have in the United States to do advanced manufacturing. So from the Department of Defense perspective, it's completely self-interested. If you look at the first manufacturing program we've done up in Youngstown, imagine a ship sailing that doesn't have to carry parts, that can print them on the ship. That's what we're doing in Youngstown. Imagine in the next 2, lightweight metals and design, digital design through the factory floor. Imagine the capabilities that the department can gain. At the end of the day, we're going to fund this for $70 million as a department, as an agency, as a government. We want out. This is not something that's going to be a sustainable factory. We want your communities to own the factory. My goal is to make me a customer. I want to be buying items from you, from your facilities. And people are tired of hearing it from me in the office, but unless it has a loading dock, I'm not interested in investing. Give me a loading dock, manufacture things, and manufacture them here in the United States. We can do it. We have the skills, we have the capabilities, and we have the resources. So thank you very much.